Corruption in South Dakota. I'm here today to introduce Mike Myers again, one of the few politicians I absolutely trust because, like he has said, he cannot be bought. What happens when politicians are bought? You get corruption. South Dakota, I'm explaining how South Dakota corruption has affected all of us. For example, in healthcare, I'm on record for over 3 years on how Dugard and Rounds have ushered in Obamacare. There are few winners in Obamacare, and the huge hospitals are one such winner. Deception is corruption, and we are being deceived by Rounds and Dugard in how they implement Obamacare into South Dakota while saying they're against it. Okay, what happens when somebody talks against the government takeover of healthcare? Let's ask Dr. Picardi, who is now in federal prison. He is there for tax evasion, quote unquote, even though in his court transcript, his U.S. attorney who charged him said, what this man has done is not illegal, he just has not paid his fair share of taxes. That will get you in prison if you talk against the healthcare in South Dakota. Dr. Picardi did mission work on the reservations and lives in a double-wide trailer, but he came out strong against Hillary Care and Obamacare. You see, our politicians are well paid by the healthcare monopoly, and Dr. Picardi was too close to exposing their agenda. Common Court, I am on record saying I would change how Rounds and Dugard cemented us into a rigorous, that word rigorous means unmovable, a set of rigorous and untested set of standards which are injuring our children and tying the hands of our teachers. This is corruption on a global scale. Bill Gates has said he wanted to use our children as human capital for his business enterprise. Now stay tuned on this one. You will see how the past two governors have sold our children into the system standards. Okay, let's talk EB-5. EB-5 is where foreigners can cut in line for U.S. citizenship if they have $500,000 to invest in failed Governor's Office of Economic Development programs, like Northern Beef, like Knight and Carver Wind Blade Repair, and like Dublin Dairy, among others. When this federal program was first started in South Dakota, the Governor's Office of Economic Development began by trying to control all the dairies in South Dakota. Why is that bad? Well, we have laws against monopolies, and this will be a monopoly if they keep going with it. South Dakota and the Chinese have also been tied to the uranium mine, to turkey plants, to Keystone Pipeline. And it's interesting how many of their friends make money off these failed and or risky programs. But some people aren't so lucky, and they have been persecuted. Take, for example, Stace Nelson. He came against the Chinese putting a dairy confinement in his backyard, and he is currently being sued by the state. When Dugard had polling, he had some polling on my race and with Deb Peters, and his people used a fake and discontinued phone number to call from, which is illegal. It's against the Federal Truth in Caller ID Law of 2005. But when I called the Republican PUC, he didn't care about it. But when Stace did some robocalls on his own, the state made up a new law that he would have to have a disclaimer detailing who the group was that was calling. Mind you, I could not find out the group that Governor Dugard's poll was. Whenever I tried to call his number, that number came up on my caller ID as discontinued. Seriously, I think the state is being a bully here. Let's take Dawn Haybeck's dairy. Her life was destroyed because she would not use Chinese EB-5 money to convert her raw milk dairy into a communist Chinese financed operation. In fact, after she refused, coincidentally, her agricultural loan was called, and Dugard's bureaucrats have just made raw milk illegal without the legislature. They ruined her financially. This is retribution in the worst sense. This is what a mafia does. So what do? Do we try to run for office? What if they don't like you? Like Stephanie Strong, Annette Bosworth. Stephanie Strong had her petitions rejected by Jason Gant without the liberal leniency that is required of him by our state statutes. He did for Brian Gosch. When Brian Gosch notarized his own petition for the State House, Gant let that one slide, even though according to the National Notary Foundation, South Dakota law prohibits that. Here's the email I got from Lori Farmer, National Notary Foundation, saying he absolutely cannot notarize his own petitions. Grant let him do it. Can't let him do it. And it seems that if you try to insist on justice, you get sued. Stephanie tried to get justice by suing the state when Gosh got with the Secretary of State what she didn't get, leniency. Now she is being sued for $40,000 and her life is ruined by South Dakota State. Let's talk about other lives being ruined. Look at the Minnie Foster case. 3 girls were placed in a rapist's home, and the state sued the advocates of those girls when they complained. Brandon Tollefers and Shirley Schwab spent $250,000 each of their own money to defend their name. The judge threw out the state's lawsuit, but they too were ruined, and they're terrified of such an evil empire that would do such a thing to South Dakota citizens. Look at Brady Falcons, a teenager in state custody that languished with liver toxicity for a month before anybody took him to the doctor. No, I'm sorry, several months before anybody took him to a doctor. He died en route to the hospital, and his mother was never given an explanation. But she was given the $40,000 medical bill that the state should have paid. Look at the Bose family. After they legally adopted 3 children, the tribe and the state let the biologically abusive grandmother have the children, even when they suspected the little 4-year-old was sodomized by a friend of the grandmother. Let's talk about injustices we all bear. No one wants to start a business in South Dakota because of our single-party, kiss-the-ring state government. We are becoming like China, where if you don't belong to the Rhino Republican Party, you get blackballed or worse. We have Monsanto influencing our agriculture, a chemical company bent on genetically modified organisms, whose highly paid board member is also the highly paid president of SDSU. They are tied tightly to GMO ethanol corn and insist on feeding their toxic waste, called distillers' grains, to our dairy cows. And what about the no-bid contracts that special political people get? All those state tourism contracts that went to the now Republican state party chair. The contracts that Dugard's Children's Home Society got while he was lieutenant governor for the questionable foster children. Removing children from their homes is profitable, you know. And his operation had waiting lists while other homes were barely making it. Oh, and did you know that in the first 3 years of Dugard's administration, child abuse rose 36%? Or did it? Or did we just need the money we got for placing kids in foster care? Do you see why I'm frustrated with the corruption and the abuse of power in South Dakota? That's what happens when one power gets way too much authority and disregards the law and hurts people. I am trusting that Mike Myers will change this. He is a man who I do trust, and he knows I trust very few people up in here. Even though we don't agree eye to eye, I know I can trust him, and when he says he can't be bought, he can't be bought. So, Mike, would you just follow up here and help me explain to the people how you're going to rid South Dakota of corruption?
Stay up here.
Okay.
Laurel Hubbel and I don't agree on a lot of issues, but we'll bring these together. We agree on one issue, and that is and I described, because we're being sued. I'm suing that Secretary of State because the Secretary of State is trying to keep her off the ballot and not giving me as an independent the same prerogative that a Democrat or Republican would have. And by the way, next Monday at 2 p.m., Judge Pearsall is going to rule on that, but I described the Secretary of State as the hitman for the Republican machine. That's caused me to resurrect. This goes back, yes, 1996. I was a lot better looking then, and I was stronger, and I was in a 300-pound bench press. And I said, start the revolution with me. And Laura, it's taken a while, but let's start a revolution. They got me part 1, Tempest interview with Michael Meyer. They described me as a populist and a medicine man. So let's talk about the fact that we're here talking about EB5. The truth is, people don't want to hear any more about it. They want this all to go away. Now, if you go out there and have some signatures notarized, all thousands, like they 4 felony counts against Dr. Annette Bosworth. But if you divert $70 million and put the pockets of the machine, we'll just kind of forget about that. And by the way, once again, and you know this, once again, an FBI report concluded that the muzzle of that shotgun that killed that gentleman was more than 18 inches away from his stomach. And they can't release the full report. Now, my response to what you're driving at is that we're talking about honorable men, honest gentlemen. If anyone knows about EB-5, then should be held accountable. There's 2 gentlemen. First of all, one gentleman's name is Michael Rounds.
Yes, yes.
And this other gentleman is Dennis Dugard.
Familiar, aren't they?
Now, why don't they walk into a room like this, go under oath, and say, public, Republicans, Democrats, people at large, ask us any question that you'd like to ask, and we will answer truthfully and honestly. Now, why can't we achieve that? You were in Peter.
Because they know we'll be in the front row. That's why they don't.
Well, we know that Susan Wismer couldn't get a second to move this further ahead. All right. There's a good, I think you and I are going to succeed, because I believe it is time for the revolution. Now, there's a nice statute out there in the South Dakota codified law that provides that when the governor believes it's in the best interest of the public at large that a further investigation be held, that he has, in this case it could be she, has the authority to appoint, and that's what we'll do, appoint an independent special prosecutor, free of politics, and go in there and dig right down into the bowels of what's happened. And is that what you recommended that I do as governor?
No, that would be a dream come true. Yes, that would be a dream come true. I think South Dakota would feel safe. Once again, South Dakota does not feel safe. South Dakota feels like they self-muzzle themselves. They're afraid to say. They're afraid to say things. They're afraid to, antagonize the state. That is no way to live. That's no way for free people to live. What you're explaining would help that a long way to restore that sense of freedom, that sense of ease again to the South Dakota people.
Fear.
Fear.
Nothing to fear but fear's help. But fear shuts everybody down. It creates anxiety. It creates anger. And as was pointed out, there's a lot of people out there in fear that know exactly what happened and where it happened, but they're fearful.
Yes.
Is that why? Yeah. How many people in the House and how many in the Senate?
70 in the House, 35 in the Senate.
35 in the Senate.
70 in the House.
70 in the House. These are people that we sent off to Pierre to represent the people. And they're sitting there muzzled and afraid to second the motion and pursue further.
There is.
Well, is there a way that we can get a subpoena and bring Mr. Rounds and Mr. Dugard into a room and put them under oath? How can we do that? You've been out there in Pierre. You understand how that works. Tell me, how are we going? How during the campaign? How can we make this happen?
I don't know about the campaign. The campaign, we can just educate people. Well, once we get there, we can do like New Jersey does, and they have a totally independent body of people that does kind of an interloper between the people and the government on how to, what makes them both legal, and they're the investigators. They don't have to depend on the news, they don't have to depend on the bought and paid for media. This is an independent body of people that gets to the bottom of things. We need that in South Dakota. Gotta be governor though.
Between now and so there's a reason that perhaps they ought to think about starting the revolution. Now, the oldest governor in the United States at age 78. Number two, I'm not for sale because I have my Social Security and I've got my pension plan. And we go out in the open and let's have this discussion, let's kick this thing around. There's not much else they can do because, as a good Catholic, I'm heading for the St. Michael's Cemetery, but I may have some time left. Now, tell me, you and I have a background that's similar in healthcare. Why are you not for sale?
I'm not for sale because the purchasers are not the brightest bulbs in the bunch, okay? The ones who want to purchase us are the government. I see a lot more ingenuity, a lot more genius, a lot more compassion for the people in the independent market, in the private market, than I do in either big corporate or big government. And what's happening now is that big corporations and big government, they're joining together. So the small business, the small doctor, the independent people have nowhere to go.
Again, I talked about that in my articles. Whoever gets to the upstream part that collects the money, whether that's government or corporations, but what's happened, the government brings in these trillions of dollars, like vultures, and there's a lot of successful people. They circle around, those trillions of dollars come in, and insert the catheter into the bowels of that money and walk off, and that's why we have privatized Medicare with those big insurance companies where they pay their executives $5, $20,
The not-for-profits, you mean?
Both the for-profits and the not-for-profits, they pay the not-for-profits a little less than the for-profits.
But they don't include
But they don't distribute the stock in the same way. So again, I'm looking on the healthcare, and once again, start the revolution. And I can see why the system objected to my role at the university. I'd send students off to do research, and they would say, "Who's your professor?" And at one time, I sent them out to find out through GuideStar. You can find out the compensation level of persons who are employed and under contract with not-for-profits. So I asked each student to go out and find an MD, a physician, overwhelmingly allopath, and come back with their annual income for the previous year. And objections were voiced to the university, and the question was asked, why? What does that have to do with health care?
It's your paying for it.
Yes. And so I ducked and I escaped that bullet. But I can see once again, this was part 2 of that Tempest article. Greed and power. Greed and the abuse of power in the Sioux Falls medical establishment. Abuse of power comes from the concentration of both economic and political power. And I've talked to you before how I got shut down in my radio broadcast because a notable executive with the healthcare system called the particular outlet and reminded them that they were buying $55,000 worth of advertising each year, and you're allowing this heretic, this Michael Myers, to make negative observations about our wonderful healthcare system. We have an opportunity to educate people about health care, and let's take a real good look at what's going to happen with EB5. We know that the federal government is presumably continuing with an investigation. Are you optimistic about an objective conclusion?
Yes, I am.
You are.
One reason is because we have the U.S. attorney and the state attorney general are best friends. They host, political campaign fundraising dinners for each other. They are in the same bed, and I don't think we're going to get justice in South Dakota until we clean house, until we cut the head off of this giant.
Will they subpoena Rounds and Dugard?
They'll get out of it. I know they will. The only thing that's gonna get rid of them is you.
You wanna make a 25-cent wager on this?
Sure.
You're betting 25 cents that ultimately, even with the federal investigation, Mr. Rounds and Mr. Dugard will not be brought into a room, put under oath, and asked about what they know and what their role was in the EB5 activity. Is that the wager you're making?
Not unless you're governor. That won't happen unless you're governor. Which is why he needs